people know that we're here, what we're doing, so they can follow us. Also, most of you have received a flyer, and if you haven't, we can text it to you, so you can also post that flyer in your Facebook and social media with more information for the community to know what we're doing. And tomorrow we have a family fun day at the State House. Invite 3 people. Get on your phones, invite them. From 12 noon to 3, free food, activities, and Sheree will give you more information for that. So make sure you do those 3 things today. I want to thank the Rhode Island Black Lives Matter. Gary, where's Gary?
Yes.
Gary, thank you so much for all the support and for letting us use your space and all the work that you do. This is an amazing space, and he's been more than willing to offer it to the community, so y'all know that if you need it, it's here to use. We also want to thank Raymond's brother, Taylor Shop. He helped us sew all the patches together to build this quilt.
Yes.
We still have that some days. He was like, no, I'm not going to charge you. This is too important to charge, so we wanted to thank him for that. And then to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. There was this hurricane coming and all this stuff, but we're here. We're the hurricane.
Yay!
That's right. So with that said, I want to ask you to help me give Sheree a big round of applause. She's been running around and I've been following her to make sure that she stays there.
I love that chant because I want to do it one more time, just so everyone who's watching on Facebook Live and everyone knows that when I say free, you say her. Free her! Free her! Free her! Woo! So again, yes, definitely welcome to the Rhode Island portion of that New England Clemency tour, led by the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. You see the T's representing in mass numbers and has been doing this work for over a decade. And in partnership with some incredible organizations and local justice warrior here, like ourselves, the Formerly Incarcerated Union, where I see many members. I see one of our co-founders, James Montero, and Raquel Baker, Sheila Brown, so many others who are part of the union, Coyote, Rhode Island with Bella, here today, as well as Sister Fire,
Yes.
with Deetra, Serge, who has been there since day one and represent.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Healing Arrows, and I see Leticia with Healing Arrows. We have the Native Clemency quilt as well, and you'll see it there on the table. There's more information there if you want to learn more, and you can ask people around the room. Definitely, and again, I want to give thank you to Black Lives Matter and Brother Gary, and again for allowing us to use this organizing space to get this work done. So thank you so much. And I also want to sincerely thank all of you for being here with us today to kick off this Rhode Island tour and your dedication to the fight to free her.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
There's so many I know that continue this work tirelessly to restore justice in Rhode Island for all Rhode Islanders. So, we're definitely stronger together.
Right.
And I just want to thank you all again for being here. So without further ado, I did want to ask our panelists to come up to the stage and take a seat. And I'm going to what I'm going to do is just call your name, and when it's your turn to talk, I'm going to introduce your bio at that time. So we've got Andrea James, who's the director of National for Incarcerated Girls. We got also Daniel Metz, who's joining us here on Zoom. Can you hear us over there, Danielle? I hope you can hear us.
Danny, can you hear us?
Okay, good. I was going to say Zoom technicalities there. And thank you for joining, because I know the storm and you're from out of state, so definitely thank you for being with us. Geraldine Koku.
Geraldine Kwaku.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And Dan Donadio, also from the New England Innocence Project. Thank you for being here. And I want to say Geraldine here representing Trayara Hudgen, who is currently incarcerated at the
Free
ACI,
her.
and one of our, yes, alongside of Gary Dean to fight for her release. So thank you so much for being here. Yes. So, you know, to start off, I'm gonna take a seat, although you guys are, you're the ones. So, I
Can you
think,
let grandma in?
yes, I can, definitely, thank you so much for seeing that. And I'm gonna ask you, Andrea, at that point in time, to introduce Grandma when you can ask her to come up with
Okay.
a little intro.
Yep.
Is she in? I think what we've got is.
If you unpin.
Right. I'm gonna put it on. Is she in? I do see her. I'm gonna change the views on speakers.
There you go, gallery. There you go. Hey, grandma.
Hey, grandmas.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay,
All right, we're getting ready to get started,
All right.
okay, grandma?
how's everybody?
Good. All right, I'm gonna go second.
I'm glad to be on here to see everybody. They said, we talk about clemency.
Yep, we get ready to
We're
get
about to start the
started.
panel, and we're gonna call you in. Is
I
that
can't
good?
hear you.
I said, we're about to start the panel, and then we're gonna call you in. How's that?
Can you hear us, Grandma?
Yes, I can hear you.
So she said we're gonna start the panel, then they're gonna call you in, okay?
All right, okay. Now, clemency is a general term.
Grandma, Grandma. We're gonna start, they didn't start yet.
Okay, all right.
She's ready.
Yes, always ready. We love it. So before we begin, I did want to start with a quote by the council, and these words are shared by all of the coalition members. And you know, we believe a prison will never be the place for a woman or girl to heal and advance her life.
You're breaking up.
That the prison most often causes further social, economic harm and does not result in an increase in public safety. And that the prison experience increases trauma in women. And if they are mothers to children that are separated from them, and that prison system deepens poverty in the individual lives of incarcerated people and the overall economic stability of their communities. And that the current criminal legal system has failed and needs to be dismantled. So I just wanted to start with that felt by the council. So
You know, some of that was so bothered, like, I don't know what it was. I'm gonna turn up my speaker to see if maybe that's the problem. Okay?
Shay's calling you, grandma. Answer the phone.
Okay, can you say something now?
Shay is calling you, answer your phone.
Put your cell phone mute and answer the phone.
1 minute.
You want me to just mute Grandma?
let's do that. We'll unmute you.
And we'll unmute you in a minute.
Her. We want him.
There you go. Now you can put a picture back. She stopped her video.
Oh, I think she did, but, yeah, because she's the.
Okay, tell her she can put her video back on, Shay. Just mute yourself. There you go.
All right, very good, Grandma. So, you know, we're gonna start, I'm gonna introduce each panelist, and pose a general question, so I'll introduce you each, and then once I introduce you, I'll pose that question. So I wanted to start with Andrea James. And Andrea James is the founder and executive director of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, founder of Families for Justice of Healing, author of Umper Bunkies, Unite and Other Thoughts on the Politics of Mass Incarceration, a 2015 Soros Justice Fellow, and recipient of the 2016 RFK Human Rights Award. And Andrea has worked with the criminal legal system for more than 25 years. And you're looking at me like, what? I know this. and she's used her experience to raise awareness of the effect of incarceration on women and themselves, their children, and communities, and raise awareness needed to shift from a criminal legal system to a system focused on human justice. So welcome, Andrea.
Well, thank you. I think you can hear me. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I don't really have much of an inside voice ever. But thank you. I want to say thank you to Cherie.
Right.
We've been at this for a long time, and when we meet our movement family, you know movement family when you meet them, and that's how we felt when we met Cherie. That Cherie and Bella and our sisters in Rhode Island, we just felt like we were, sorry, we just felt that we had met movement family, and so I want to say thank you to Cherie. We really look forward to getting a lot of really good work done. We started this work in 2010 inside of the prison, federal women's prison in Danbury, Connecticut. I was a criminal defense and trial lawyer who was sentenced to serve a 2-year, 24-month prison sentence for wire fraud. And I walked into that prison having to figure out how to navigate a 24-month incarceration. My youngest, one of my daughters was a young woman,
She's
where is
outside.
Sasha?
She's outside right now.
Oh, okay, that's my daughter and my grandbaby running around. And I also had an older daughter and a younger daughter who was 12 at the time. And she's now 24 or something, I don't know. And I had my last child, who was my baby boy. We call him Lucky. He's John Jr. We call him Lucky because at 45 I had him and he's damn lucky to be here. And I walked into this prison and it was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Roxbury, where a family that's been in the same house off of Humboldt Ave for 5 generations. So I was acutely aware of the criminal legal system. I grew up and wanted to be a criminal defense attorney because of all of the pain and struggle that my family members and my neighbors and that entire community, the corridor we live in is the most incarcerated corridor today in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so I understood acutely all of the pains that the criminal legal system has exacted upon us, the sisters who have lost their children to the child welfare system that mirrors the criminal legal system. But to walk into that prison, you know, and I stood in a courtroom every day and defended people entangled in the criminal legal system, but to walk into that prison as an incarcerated woman and be separated from my children, and my, at that time, Lucky was just turning 6 months old, was devastating, absolutely devastating. And I had to figure out how to navigate that. And my sisters here, Virginia, was literally picked me up and dusted me off and said, here's how you gotta do your time. This is what you're gonna have to do. And it's a shame because you literally have to put your children on the shelf. If you think about them every day, you won't be able to function. And what kind of system or country does that? That forces you to literally put your children out of your mind. And Shay is one of our founding members also. Shay was in that prison with us. Virginia had been there. I had to figure out how to navigate 24 months. Virginia had been there for almost 2 decades. Wow. Grandma, who you're gonna hear from, is our matriarch. You'll hear why. But these are the women who literally picked me up and helped me get through that, and then gave me the mandate, because I was the only one leaving anytime soon, to literally go out, and we created let me just paint the picture. 2010, when we were all in the prison together, was the same year that Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, was published. And so that book, lots of people have written about the criminal legal system and from slavery to mass incarceration. Many people had written about it, including incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, but there was something about the chronology, the way that Michelle Alexander presented that book, that it piqued an awareness in the country that was unprecedented. Regardless of the fact that she left out women and all this other stuff. Michelle and I have talked about this. But, you know, it was profound, the reaction that it received in the country. And so in 2010, in addition to Michelle Alexander's book came out, there was also the release of this scathing investigation by the Media Democracy Center about the ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And so if you don't know about ALEC, A-L-E-C, Google them, because ALEC were the framers. They were responsible. They were the infrastructure of mass incarceration in this country. They were funded by the Koch brothers, who have the gall, the audacity to center themselves or think that they're centering themselves in the criminal legal reform space right now. But I'll digress if I get into them too much. But this was the climate when we were in the prison, and we were all women. The Fair Sentencing Act on the federal level had just passed. It didn't affect any of the women, mostly black, brown, and poor women who were sentenced under mandatory minimum sentences for drugs. Fair Sentencing Act did nothing because it wasn't made retroactive on behalf of most of the women that were in their prison. It was devastating to actually live in the prison at the time that the Fair Sentencing Act passed and have to explain to most of the women in that prison that you weren't going to get out, you weren't going to find any relief. It was really quite heartbreaking. But we sat in that prison and we decided, we just said we're going to end incarceration of women and girls as women sitting in a prison. That was the most, you know, audacious thing. How? Right? How? But we never wavered. We never changed our goal. If we were women, we identified as women. So if you identify as a woman and girl, you know, we're going hard for you. That's our niche. That's what we carved out. And so it, you know, includes our transgender sisters. However you identify as a woman and girl, come on board. And we know that everything we do, although we advocate to end the incarceration of women and girls, everything we do affects everybody else. Right. And everything we do, we just brought brothers home who have been in prison for 30 years. You know, we do work to get everybody home, but we do unapologetically. Our work is centered and focused on women and girls. And it's been 10 years, and we have made a lot of progress. We've worked with the Obama administration. We were instrumental in helping 50 women, you'll hear from one of them, come home who were literally serving life with no parole. That means life in the federal system. And we decided after 10 years of trying to figure out, literally thinking about this for years, how do you operationalize the goal of ending incarceration of women and girls? And we looked at this map of the country, and you know, we were all over the country. Like pre-pandemic, we had been on the road solid for 3 years, meeting sisters in every corner of the country, little convenings, kitchen tables, all the way up to 25, 30 women convenings, and then we had a town hall meeting on the same day, at the same time, across the country, in 35 states. And then every year we have the Free Her Conference, where we bring hundreds of women together to talk about this issue. And so we had a lot of good, what we call participatory research. And finally we threw the gauntlet down and said, enough talking, put your foot in front of the other and start doing. And we looked at the map of the country, and there was this glaring part of the country, like a big beaming spotlight, that were the New England states. Now I was happy because I live in the New England. It's a part of the country I'm very familiar with. And that is because we decided to start the national campaign to end incarceration of women and girls. Literally, and I'll shut up after this, and then come back to what we're doing with it. But just to frame this out a little bit, because in the New England states, there's 6 states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. In those 6 states, we have the lowest incarceration populations of women in the country. Literally, there's 77 women standing between us and ending incarceration, closing the prison, the Vermont prison, the Vermont women's prison, right? Besides Massachusetts and Connecticut that are in the total jail and prison. Like in Massachusetts, we only have 135 women in the state prison. Total, in the county jails, total is, I don't know, one is the expert. 525. Yep, in total, right? So Massachusetts and Connecticut are neck and neck with the 3 digits. It plummets to 2 digits in all of the other New England states. And other than Wyoming and Nebraska or something like that, which we're getting to, you know, this made all the sense in the world. Why? Because we could build a drumbeat. If we started to create a model, and in all 6 of the New England states, we begin this very increasingly louder drumbeat and begin to apply pressure in the way that we figured out these 3 buckets to work through to do this, and we do it simultaneously, we can literally end incarceration of women and girls in the New England states. And then the next layer is already organizing themselves. That's Louisiana, Chicago, Illinois, Michigan. So the sisters, we have the National Advisory Council, and the sisters in that next stage up are already, you know, watching the model that we're creating here in the New England states. So here we are in Rhode Island. It's just the first leg. Clemency is an easy way to end incarceration of women and girls. With the stroke of the pen, a governor can end it. And we have 4 categories of elderly, sick, terminally ill, survived and punished, and long timers. You've been in prison 10 years. Makes no sense. None of it makes sense to us. But if you've been down 10 years, you need to come home. So that's where we're starting from, and I'll end there as an introduction, and then we can talk more. So thank you.
That was amazing.
An opportunity after everyone speaks for anyone who has questions, so you know, keep that in mind, so they will know on the phone, and we'll go through it. So definitely hold on to those questions. So next up is Danielle Metz, who's joining us on Zoom. Hi Danielle, I'm gonna read your.
Yay!
Hi. So I'm gonna read your introduction, if I may. So Danielle is a native New Orleans, from New Orleans, Louisiana, vigorously working on the front lines of criminal legal reform and advocacy for the rights of incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals, and is an active member of the community where she mentors youth housed at the New Orleans Juvenile Justice Center. Danielle's strength and service is driven by her faith in God and life experiences, as is dedicated to giving a voice to men and women on the inside of prison walls. Voices that are rarely heard and most times forgotten. Her efforts are imperative to her not only because she understands their plight, but it is also imperative because she has personally experienced a plight within the system of mass incarceration. In 1993, as a first-time non-violent offender, Danielle received 3 life sentences, plus 20 years in prison, and was convicted of conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute cocaine, continuing criminal enterprise, and possession with intent to and monetary instruments. Although the judge at her sentencing jarringly told her that she forfeited her right to live in a humane society, she never accepted that unjust sentence placed upon her life. She instead exhibited a mindset of tenacity through her journey. She served 23 years in prison, and her life sentence was unexpectedly commuted by President Barack Obama in 2016. Wow. Danielle is currently a community health worker for the formerly incarcerated Transition Clinic, and is an avid proponent of healthcare initiatives focused on the prevention of health risks and health disparities within this vulnerable population. Danielle has continued to soar beyond the vicious elements of incarceration, After raising 2 children and a grandchild, she's enrolled at Southern University, New Orleans, where she's pursuing her bachelor's degree in social work. Yes, and she in turn received a personal correspondence from President Barack Obama acknowledging the positive impact her example will have on others looking for a second chance.
Right.
Good afternoon. I am also the for the National Council, I am the Clemency Coordinator person. And I'm just honored to be here today to be a part of the Clemency Launching Tour. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there today because of medical issues that just arise within the next 24 hours, the last 24 hours. But nevertheless, I'm still here in support and standing in solidarity with those who's fighting for freedom of others. I think she told you the most part about my story, but I want to turn my story into action for others. And this kind of brought me back to when I was incarcerated, when I see us on the Zoom, because I remember there was a bunch of women that gathered together to bring attention to my story. They were going into universities, like people like Andrea James and different organizations that came about and brought attention to my story. They believed in my story and they didn't let it just fall by the wayside. They believed that I can be exonerated, I can come home. And when you have people fighting for you like these women who's on the front lines for me, it gives you hope. And the last thing that people who's serving life sentences, they want to know that somebody cares about them. Last week I had the pleasure of being a part of our team going out, and I thought about Angela Jefferson, and I saw her son, and when I saw her son, his smile, that I will never forget his smile when I saw him, and he saw us riding in cars, caravanning, going all over, just, bringing attention to what happened to his mother. He was 4 years old when he left, when his mother left. So that kind of broke my heart, but I know he felt good knowing that he have a group of women like the National Council who not gonna give up on his mother's story. When you're incarcerated and you're serving a life sentence, we're the people who really don't give the people any problems, because we want an opportunity to come home. We want a date. We want people to realize that we're not the people that they say we were when we first started. So we worked very hard on changing the narrative of who our pre-sentence investigation report says that we are. And with that being said, it's just like they say clemency is like, it's mercy. And so I think it's most effective, I read it somewhere, it's most effective is when it's given to those who are underprivileged and undeserved of it, who they think. So if you stay 23 years, 30 years in prison, how much more time do you need? I thought prison was about rehabilitation, about changing, betterment for people who are rehabilitating themselves, who have come around to be different people who have changed the narrative of who they was when they first started. So clemency is very important, because after you exhaust all your appeals and everything, if you don't have clemency, you don't have no option. The only other option is death. So those women who are incarcerated, they're like buried alive. You got them with 30 and 50 and 80 year sentences. It's like, that is just ridiculous, And I think that this tool that the president has at his use, it hasn't been used enough. Because we always talk about mass incarceration. I think clemency is the first antidote to mass incarceration, to start, decreasing the population of those that is incarcerated. And it's just, even when you come home, you think that you're done doing your time, but you don't know that the trauma that it has caused. Even with myself, now I'm realizing, I guess, when you're in there, you never get diagnosed for anything. The only thing they probably give you if you have a problem is some kind of meditation to make you go to sleep, so they don't have to worry about you anymore. But now that I'm home and I'm doing the work and I'm running and stuff, I say maybe I have anxiety because, I can't keep still, but I know that I'm here for a purpose. And my purpose is to bring attention to those that I left behind and to help those that I left behind. Because, even though the kids of those left behind haven't had a run-in with the Lord, they are still incarcerated as well, because as long as their parents are incarcerated, they're in prison too. I remember my mother, every year the only Christmas dinner we ever had was chicken wings in the visiting room. Because for 23 years, she was there with me every Christmas. And my kids had to get their toys after Christmas because they had to be in there with me. They didn't have to, but it was a choice that my mother made to be there with me on this holiday and even on my birthday. So we just want to ask everybody to become a part of this movement, join this movement, become a member. It's only $5 a year. And fight the good fight of bringing those home, because otherwise they won't be coming home. And like our motto is, you know, prison is not a place for a woman or girl to advance. It only furthers damage, and I'm proof of that also. It does, because some of us learn all kind of behavior that we never would have practiced had we been in society. But it's called survival. Survival of the fittest. We have to survive inside that brick wall. And it's just that we want our governors, we want our president to exercise the tool of clemency. I mean, the power is in a pen, and he can start right now by just granting. We did we launched 100 women in 100 days. We haven't seen anything. It's down to 99 women, but we're gonna keep on fighting until justice is served. So that's basically it that I have to say until y'all have any questions or anything. But it's a hard road. It's very hard. It's very depressing when you're trying to fight and they don't have anything to fight for. You know, nobody's out here fighting for them. So when they hear about us, even if you just say their name, it gives them so much hope. It rejuvenates them and be like, they know somebody's out there fighting for them. A letter means so much inside the inside. Just to know that I can call somebody after this presentation and say, hey, we talked about clemency again, so you know we have 100 more people that know about the situation that's going on in society. So with that being said, I'll just pass it to Grandma, who is ever next.
Thank you so much, Danielle. What I'm going to do is go next to Geraldine, and I want to leave Grandma as the anchor to this panel. So I'm going to go to Geraldine. And Geraldine is here today to represent Trayara Hudgens, who continues to fight a wrongful conviction. She is currently serving a life sentence at the ACI. Trayara has continued to maintain her innocence, and Geraldine's goal is to make sure Trayara's voice is heard from the inside and to get Trayara home where she belongs. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, my name is Geraldine. Like she said, I'm here representing Trayara Hudgens. She was wrongly convicted in 2016 for a murder that she did not commit. She is serving 2 life sentences plus 10 years on top of it. She will not be able to see parole for 50 years. She continues to fight for her freedom. I did a year myself. That's how I met Trayara Hudgens. After hearing her story, I'm getting emotional. After hearing her story, it touched me because this is someone that should have gotten sentenced for conspiracy, not for the actual murder. The person that actually did the murder admitted to the murder, and Trayara got double life because she took it to trial. So I'm just here to represent her. I have my own story as well. Like, you know, I got incarcerated for a year for being an addict. I was highly addicted to crack cocaine. I asked the judge to give me a program, and he gave me 5 years, 15 months to serve. I'm on probation right now. After doing a year, like you were saying, I walked in there not knowing like what to expect, because I was never been incarcerated before. I wasn't like a bad person. I just I just did the wrong thing. But after going there and meeting all these women that have been there for decades and have been there for years, Trayara herself is going on 5 years of being there. It really touched me. And when I got out, I had told some of these women, like, I'm not gonna forget you. I'm gonna keep fighting for you guys, and I'm gonna do whatever I can in my power to do everything. And I've created Facebook pages for some of these women. Trayara is one of the persons that I'm like really, really fighting for. They all matter. but I just had a strong connection with Treyara, and that's the story that I know the most. And I don't want her to feel like anyone's given up on her, or any of these women that's incarcerated. So my story is short and simple, and we're gonna continue. Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, Grandma, can you hear us over there? Oh, yes. Look at.
You gotta unmute her.
I know. Do I have to unmute her?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can.
Can you unmute Grandma?
Yes.
Okay, you're good now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Yes. You're on, Grandma.
So let me just set Grandma up so everybody understands who she is. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Grandma?
Pardon me, I didn't hear what you said.
Right.
Andrea's gonna set you up.
Oh, so Grandma. Yes, baby. So Grandma is the matriarch of our organization. She's the matriarch of this movement. Grandma had already been in prison about 22 years or something when I came into the prison. And Grandma was another one that just, helped me to, maintain myself and learn what I had to do. And Grandma and Virginia, Taz, who's not here, but they had Vanda Cruz, they had been in prison for years together. And so Grandma was one of the ones that sent me out the door with instructions. And I've been following those instructions ever since that day. And, whatever Grandma tells us to do, we do. And we fought like hell to get Grandma out of there because prisons will kill you.
Yes.
The health conditions of women deteriorate rapidly, and Grandma was very sick. You wouldn't even know it now, but we almost lost Grandma. And so we went to the mat to get Grandma the hell out of there, and she's been at the forefront of this movement, doesn't let us forget a thing. And so I wanted you all to understand this is our matriarch that you're gonna hear from Phyllis Hardy. Can you hear it? Go ahead, Grandma.
Go on. Grandma, can you hear us? There you
Can you
go.
hear,
We can hear you.
Go ahead.
can you hear
Good. Start talking.
everybody now? I don't know why
We can
I'm
hear you.
one. Oh, wait a minute, let me open it.
Hit the Zoom thing again. It'll bring your picture back. Where's Greg?
Okay, all right.
There you go.
All right.
It went out, and I couldn't see.
We know.
Oh, all right. I didn't hear the introduction, so I guess I have to make my own. Okay. So is Grandma Hardy. I am the matriarch of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. I am also the Envy Outreach Advocate of the National Council. I'm also a member of the board, and I am also a member of the National Council. I'm not going to take it long. Clemency is a form of a general, I'm going to read it for you so you'll know exactly. It's a general term for reducing the penalty for a particular crime without actually clearing your criminal record. Remember, the clemency does not clear your record. You still have a record. And that's when you go into a pardon. So that's a difference. Because the difference is, in a pardon, it clears your record, it takes away any fines that you have, it makes you eligible to run for office, it gives you your freedom back, your whole freedom. And that's what a pardon does. The clemency clears you so you can be free. Basically, there's a few ways to get freedom out of prison, but clemency is the one that the President of the United States has the power to give you. But only if you have filed a clemency petition. It allows you to go home. It allows you, sometimes you get a clemency and it takes away some of your probation so that you get a date. It says you've done all your time, and that includes everything for clemency. Okay? But you have to fill out a petition in order to get this. And it's a lot involved in that. You have to send letters in. You have to have people in the outside write these letters. You have to send certificates in with your clemency. If you don't send it in with your clemency, you can always update it. That's very important. Because if you put in the clemency, say, in 2020, say 2019, and it's still pending, you need to tell them what you have done to improve yourself, change your mindset in these last 2 years, to show the reason why the president should give you a clemency. And you also need people on the outside fighting for you. We as a people need to fight for the ones that don't have a voice. And that's what I try to be. That is what the National Council is. We're the voice for every person that's incarcerated, including in the state prisons, including in the federal prisons. You have to get involved to a point where you write letters. You find out what they need before they leave prison. Even if they get a clemency, they might have put in that they're going to live with this one and that one, but they still need resources.
Right. Right.
Be able to reach out to resources in each of their cities and their states. But the president, remember, the president of the United States has the power of the pen to give everyone that's incarcerated a clemency. And that's what the clemency petition is for. Does anyone have any questions? I don't want to take up all your time. There's a lot of people there, and there's a lot for you to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
God bless you.
And
Any questions?
we're good, yeah, we're good, almost, we're getting there. So we had one more panel that and I probably should have said last, but again, we have Dan Donadio, who's joining the panel. So Dan is a staff attorney with the New England Innocent Project, which focuses on preventing and correcting wrongful convictions through the 6 New England states. He's a member of the National Lawyers Guild, Massachusetts chapter, and is a former public defender in New Hampshire, and he now lives in Boston. And thank you so much, Dan.
Hope everyone can hear me. Everyone in the back? All right. Unlike Andrea, I do have a very good indoor voice, so I'm going to use the microphone. It's too good, probably. So if you cannot hear me, please let me know. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep my remarks pretty brief. I really just kind of wanted to talk very basically about what the clemency process looks like. And in saying that, I've kind of already made an error, because when I use the word process, I think that implies a lot more structure and law really to this than there really is. I think that's sort of the big takeaway from like a legal perspective about what clemency is it's really not structured by law in any like serious or meaningful way. And if you think about like most decisions that get made in the criminal legal system, they are there's law to them. They're reviewable by courts, right? So like whether a search was constitutional or not, right? Bail, whether someone gets bail or stays in, whether they're guilty or not guilty of the crime that they're charged with. These are all decisions with law behind them, like the legal official decision makers have to consider the law. They're supposed to consider the law and apply that law. you know, and you think about even like parole board decisions, even the parole board is structured theoretically by the law, and the decisions they make, whether to grant parole or not, they're reviewable and appealable for abuse of discretion. And that's true even though they basically operate as kangaroo courts. You know, and so the point is, I'm not saying that these laws are good or that they're used or enforced in practice nearly as often as they should be, or even that if they were enforced, they would lead to justice, right? I'm not saying any of those things. I am simply saying that the laws exist in all of these realms in ways that they really don't in the clemency process, which I think is really important. So basically, clemency is just, and Andrea has said this, and Danielle said this too, it's the stroke of a pen that the governor has to either release someone or keep them in. And that's really it. There is no law really beyond that, other than the Constitution saying that the governor of Rhode Island or the president of the United States has this power. There's really no law telling them, this is how you use that power, this is how you're supposed to use that power. Right? That's not a thing. It's essentially, it's akin to a king having the power of mercy to grant or to withhold at his pleasure, right? So I think that's really important. The only comparison I can really think of in the whole criminal legal system, it's the prosecutor's power to bring charges or not, right? It's a similarly unreviewable power. The prosecutor gets to bring charges and what charges to bring, and you can fight those charges in court. You can say there's no evidence for those charges, but generally speaking, you have no power as a defendant to challenge the actual bringing of the charges itself or the decision, right? It's a very similar thing in the way that I think about it, that the governor of Rhode Island and the president of the United States, they can do whatever they want. When someone brings a clemency petition to them, there's no law that says what they have to do. If the governor refuses to pardon you, if the president refuses to pardon you, you can't sue him, you can't bring him to court, you can't appeal him and say, hey, you got this decision wrong, you didn't consider these factors, right? That doesn't exist in this realm. We're in this kind of Wild West in the clemency world, which is different, if not always in practice, because I think that in many ways the criminal courts are just, that's how they are, right? It's human beings with power, arbitrary power, making often unjust decisions. But it's theoretically, I think, an important difference in thinking about what clemency actually looks like and what you have to do, and really what you can do, the options that it brings to you, I think, to bring a clemency case, to bring a clemency petition. So I think really the upshot of this point is we're dealing really, when we're talking about clemency, with humans and bureaucracies who have this immense arbitrary power over life, right? We're not really dealing with laws so much when we talk about clemency, which, as I said, I think that's always true about the criminal legal system, but I think it's especially true about pardons and clemency. So with that said, I just wanted to kind of touch very briefly on the process in Rhode Island. I'll touch even more briefly on the federal process, because they are different, right? So the governor of Rhode Island has the power to grant clemency over state convictions in the state of Rhode Island. So if a Rhode Island state criminal court, Commonwealth of Rhode Island, criminal court convicts you, the governor of Rhode Island has the power to grant clemency. If you were convicted of a federal crime in the state of Rhode Island, you're appealing instead for clemency to the President of the United States, because the President has essentially review of the clemency process over all federal crimes. But in Rhode Island, we're talking about one piece of law that structures the governor's power here. It is simply this one provision in the Rhode Island Constitution. It's Article 9, Section 13. All it says, and I'm quoting, is that the governor, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall hereafter exclusively exercise the pardoning power, except in cases of impeachment to the same extent as such power is now exercised by the General Assembly. And that really, by and large, is the law of clemency in Rhode Island, right? There's really nothing beyond that. There are no statutes on the books for this, right? There's no court decisions. It's this constitutional provision that grants the power. Rhode Island's interesting, actually, in that, so the governor has the power, but also the Senate has to give advice and consent in Rhode Island, which is a little different from a lot of states where it simply just rests in the governor's power. It's the same with the president. The president does not have to get the advice and consent of the Senate for federal crimes, for federal pardons. In Rhode Island, the governor has to, if they want to pardon someone, bring it to the legislature and basically get the legislature to approve the decision, right? And so that operates, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and not a lot of states do it. And I think in practice, it seems to operate as one additional roadblock for people in the state, right? Because that's one more thing. Now, the governor, I would say, generally speaking, I'm not in their heads, but I assume that generally they don't want to have to do this extra work of selling it to the legislature, right? Of selling this, please approve this, right? So that's a difference. And I'll get back to this one case. The last Clemency case in Rhode Island was from 2011, and I'll get back to it at the end. I'll spoil it. The person who was pardoned was actually killed. He was executed in 1845. And that's the last person who the Commonwealth of Rhode Island pardoned. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about clemency in Rhode Island. I'll get back to that really quickly. But basically the way that it works is, so you write to the governor and you request clemency from him. And there are handouts, I think, over there, which if anyone is interested, you should definitely grab one later. It's the letter that you receive from the Rhode Island governor's office when you request information about the clemency process. And the way that it works is if you or a loved one is seeking clemency, the process is that you contact the Rhode Island governor's office, you note your intent to seek clemency, to seek the clemency process. They then send you this letter. And this letter outlines all the steps, which really is just putting together a packet and it's mailing it to the governor's office. I won't go through everything word for word, but they want your official, current, up-to-date criminal record, not the one from when you were convicted, so you've got to pay I think it's $5 or something to get your up-to-date criminal record from the BCI in Rhode Island. You have to describe the underlying offenses for which you were convicted, right? In your own words, you're supposed to describe what you were convicted of. You're supposed to include any official court documents, anything you've done in prison in terms of rehabilitation or educational or treatment programs, or while you're on parole, copies of all the police reports, and also any other information that you think would be helpful, right? Which is just an enormous catch-all clause, which is in some ways the most important part of it, and it's just kind of described in this throwaway way. But this is where we're talking about your letters of support from the community and from family and from loved ones, from information about your family, your children, right? The people out there who love you and support you, the things that, make you a person that, should not be in a cage, right? I mean, that stuff all goes at number 6 there, and it's kind of just dumped in there behind all this other stuff. But you put together this packet and you mail it to this petition and you mail it to the governor's office, and then you wait, right? You can wait for months, you can wait for years, and at some point you get a decision, and historically speaking, it's not a good decision in Rhode Island, right? I mean, as we know, the last one is in 2011. But what I'd say is that, that's not a reason not to be trying, and in fact, the more people that try, I think the more likelihood of success, right? I mean, that's kind of how I think about it, is that the strength of the movement, I think, dictates the likelihood of the success. And this movement that's coming together here and pushing for clemency in Rhode Island, I think, is going to be the key to changing the way that clemency has worked in the state. And I'll use the example of this 2011 pardon. This gentleman, John Gordon, who was an Irishman who came over from Ireland 6 months before he was convicted of a murder wrongfully, many believe, and he was executed in 1845. And 166 years later, basically a movement of people came together on his behalf 166 years later and lobbied the legislature of Rhode Island and said, look, this guy was wrongfully convicted. He was a victim of anti-Irish prejudice at the time in Rhode Island back in the mid-1800s. And this conviction isn't just, and it should be overturned. And what this movement of people on behalf of the long dead John Gordon did was they lobbied, actually they did the process in reverse. They went to the legislature first and they said, hey, pass a resolution saying that he should be pardoned, that the governor, Lincoln Chafee at the time, should grant clemency. And we're giving you our advice and consent up front that we think he should be granted clemency, right? So they did the whole process backwards. They got the legislature to support it. And in fact, they got clemency for John Gordon.
Wow.
So, you know, I was thinking about like, what do you draw from this now,
Right. What do you
right?
get from that?
In 2021, it's so different and someone's so long dead, which certainly we're not waiting around for that to happen to anyone who's in prison now, right? So it's like, it's so different, but I think the takeaway for me, the big one is, it's, in this case, this long dead Irishman, I mean, it took a movement to make this happen. It took creative thinking to make this happen, right? They went backwards. They went to the legislature instead of the governor first. They built power, they built support, and that's how they did it, right? And, you know, that's a lesson for me, I think, in Rhode Island, right? Is that sort of creative thinking, flexible thinking, that movement power building that they did for this guy. I mean, that's what needs to be happening for, you know, every woman incarcerated in this state, right? So that's what I think about when I think about that case. It's a super interesting sort of historical anecdote, but yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from it actually in its own way. Yeah. So I'll stop there. I feel like I've been talking for a while, but if people have like more specific questions about, I didn't even talk about the federal process, but if people do have specific questions about any of that, you know, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you.
We have an application for federal and an application for Rhode, just so people can concretely see
Right.
what that looks like.
Yeah, so
What it requires.
the federal one's over there. It's a multi-pager. It's pretty lengthy. The federal process is a lot, I'll say it's a lot more sort of organized, which isn't to say it has the same exact, you know.
Bureaucracy is fine.
It's the bureaucracy, right? There's a much bigger bureaucracy in the federal system, which this petition makes pretty clear. It's an enormous packet that you have to fill out in the federal system. But take a look at it if you're interested. The Rhode Island letter is pretty short. There's not a whole lot to it.
So with that, I know everyone's been really listening and hearing, and I really wanted to open this up to people in the audience, if they have questions for any of our panelists, comments, whatever it is. This
I have a
is,
question.
Yes.
For Darby, right? Darby?
Gerardine.
Gerardi?
G.
I'm
G's
not
fine.
gonna get it right, so we ain't doing wasting one more time. But, does, the young lady, what's her name, Tara?
Trayara.
Trayara, does she have, clemency already in?
She has, she had put one in. She put a pardon in and was denied.
So we could describe a little bit the difference. The terms are used interchangeably depending on where you are. Some places only use pardon, some places only use a commutation, clemency, or commuting the sentence. The feds, on the federal level, they mean different things. So a pardon on the federal level means after post-incarceration, you can apply for a pardon, and the president can pardon you, and it's still an admission of guilt. When you accept a pardon, you're admitting your guilt in the transgression, but it exonerates you from all of the collateral consequences of having a federal convictions, okay? So pardon is different than a commutation. A commutation on the federal level, for instance, is something that you apply for while you are incarcerated, okay? You have to wait 3 years post-incarceration for a pardon, from the time that you're completely off paper. But you can apply while you're in prison, which is what, like Danny received. Her sentence was commuted by President Obama, which means she was able to come out. It doesn't mean that it ends anything else. You can come out and you can, based on an individual basis, you might be on federal supervised release for 10 years. There's anything could happen. And so states, and it's too crazy to go through all the states, but we've waded through all of this stuff with the different states. And as you've heard from my brother, states have their own definitions. Some states don't use the term clemency. You talk about clemency, they don't know what you're talking about. So it's very specific. You gotta know what you're doing in the state. And so it sounds like we're in good shape in terms of getting really sound advice and we are experts at these packets. We have been putting clemency packets together forever. And so I just wanted to point that out, because you hear pardon, you hear clemency, you go commutation, like what do all these different terms mean? I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, so the answer to your question is no, she has not filed for a clemency, but she did file for a pardon and was denied.
But so again, so do you think the reason why she was denied for her pardon was because that was the wrong application to put in at that time, you know?
No,
Or just
hearing
Rhode
you.
Island, or just, she's in Rhode Island.
Right here in Rhode Island.
So just in Rhode Island, you have to, apply for a pardon first, because like you just said, it has to be a clemency, and have to go through the governor, and then the governor has to go through the Senate in order to get it passed.
I do believe now, hearing all that she did apply for the wrong thing, because she was told that she has not done all of her appeals. She has not exhausted all of her appeals. She's in the middle of an appeal right now.
If someone puts in a petition and it's denied, can you do it another way?
That's a good question. That's something I want to know too.
I don't know what, I mean, we're gonna figure all this all out for Rhode Island. It's why we're doing this work. And in the feds, you can, but you have to, there's a wait. You can't just file again. You've got to wait a period of time. I don't know why I'm blanking on this now. 3 years, I think. 2 years. For 2 years. We've done several, and every time a new president comes into office, you have to refresh that application. And so we're scrambling now to make sure that all of our 100 women, now 99, because God bless her, Martha Evanoff has died. If she weren't in prison, she'd probably still be alive. And so, you know, in the state, you want to make sure. But I mean, council raised a very good point by saying that what you have to look at every state and what you can glean and learn from it for who you're fighting for. You know, there's nothing more powerful than the power of the people. Absolutely nothing. And the fact that the legislature is involved here in Rhode Island, if enough of the people, this is a people movement, right? Just like Working Families Party. The current criminal legal system, there is no legitimacy to it. It is an iteration of slavery.
Yeah. Yep.
It was rooted in slavery. It was started as a result of the ending of slavery. And so we have to, we cannot leave the fact that clemency is racial justice out of this conversation, okay? Because if we don't understand what we're actually attempting to correct in this country, we're never going to get to where we're trying to go. We'll just recreate another system that is, you know, that replicates what we're talking about. And so we've got to be brave enough and bold enough to square up about what we're really talking about. And so clemency is a way to help us get there, but none of this is going to work. The amount of work that went into Danny coming home, and I want to remind people, and I hope that, and I'll shut up, but I hope we take the last few minutes. It's a very quick video to show the our clemency video, where you hear Danny and the daughter of the woman we're fighting for now, Michelle West, who's been in federal prison for 30 years. Serving a double life sentence. Just outrageous, okay? The person who committed the murder is out. She had nothing to do with the murder. She was entangled. She's in prison for conspiracy, which is another, we've had a participatory research project for the past 3 years in state and federal prisons around conspiracy, because so many women are sentenced under conspiracy. They no direct anything, just conspiracy. So I'm going to be all over the place, and I don't want to be all over the place. I want people to leave here understanding that we are the only thing standing in the way of ending incarceration of women and girls, ending incarceration for everybody else, but literally ending incarceration of women and girls here in the state of Rhode Island, and also moving public opinion to a very different place. It takes us to do it though. If the legislature's not gonna do it, what will make the legislature support your friend and our sister is us. Is everybody who, is that every legislator's constituent putting pressure to say, you know what, if you don't come into the 21st, 2021, what is that, 22nd of whatever that is, what is it? Whatever, 22nd century, whatever. If you don't get up to speed with what everybody else in the country thinks needs to radically be transformed, which is the criminal legal system, and start, you know, using your clemency power and so forth, we won't put you back in office. But we're far away from that. But we're not so far that we can't get there. Right? But it has to start with this handful of people and moving as a movement towards gathering more people for this fight. Money isn't the issue. We can defeat money, which none of us have. But we have the power of the people on our side. If we can come together and move collectively and create this drumbeat in these states that have the tiniest populations, we can do something significant.
Yes. I volunteered on the Clemency 2014 project.
Yes.
Federal project with
President Obama.
President Obama and Eric Holder. And I was just a little tiny cog in the wheel. And I had done a few of these, and I said, how come there aren't any women?
Right.
And I'm going to use a word I've never used in public before, intersectionality. And they said, oh, women aren't in prison long enough for us to bother.
And there are a smaller percentage of the population, so about 102 women were released under 2014, okay?
Yeah, as opposed to 1,800 men or something.
As opposed to 1,800 men. And they said it was proportional, and if you looked at any of the lists that came out during that time, and we centered, Valerie Jarrett centered women. We were invited to the White House 4 times under Obama, and she gave us an opportunity to center women in this fight. That's how we were able, with Amy Pova, who runs Can Do Clemency, was a federal woman sentenced to 30 some odd years. Clinton commuted her sentence. And Amy just gave her life to getting women out under clemency once her sentence was commuted. And her organization is still fighting very hard. We learned how to apply for clemency on behalf of our sisterhood by working. Amy is a member of the National Council. We learned this, how to do this through Amy, but we got ourselves up into the Obama White House. And we kept pushing for women. But that's why we know this is we do this unapologetically, because when we don't talk about women, and all of us who are women who have been in prison, you don't hear anything about us, know that nobody fights on behalf of women. Our numbers are smaller, but the impact on our families and our communities, 85% of incarcerated women anywhere in the world are mothers, and the majority of them were the primary caretakers of their children prior to their incarceration. Doesn't matter if you were, you weren't. It doesn't matter. You're the mother of the children. You have an effect, a direct effect on that child's life. And so these are very significant reasons, unapologetically, and I got over being apologetic about it when Angela Davis said, we absolutely need a gender lens on this. But we pushed President Obama during that 2014 to center women. And they did. The numbers didn't increase, but we got to go and talk to people about the importance of releasing women.
Well, I got involved in this through something I read in the American Bar Association Journal. And so clearly that misogyny was coming from the American Bar Association.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It still comes. It hits us from every single angle. People even say, well, what about the men? And I say, what about them? You know, what about them? We're not saying we don't, I mean, you know, we're not, I have a son, I have a husband, my husband did 10 years in the federal system and years in the New York State system. You know, I get it, but this is what we did as women, sitting in a federal prison, hearing in 2010 this massive
thunderous uptick about ending mass incarceration and didn't hear one word about us and about our children and our communities that were left behind. So that's why we do it, and I applaud you.
Right, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for your help also.
Right, Zona, thank you so much. And James, you had a question, I just want to get to everyone who had a
I
hand up.
was saying is that when a man goes to prison, he says, "Where's my lawyer?" When a woman goes to prison, she says, "Where's my children?"
That's right.
I'm James, I'm formerly incarcerated. I spent approximately 25 years of my life incarcerated up and down the East Coast. I now work inside the Department of Corrections, an organization that provides currently and formerly incarcerated people opportunities for post-secondary education. Me and Speaker Sam are very close friends, a lot of people in this room. I agree with both of them on this first. I actually paid for a lot of education. All of these girls right here are my students. I just want to say that I want say that there needs to be a back because the response that they are giving is that if we close this prison down, it's not going to like everybody's not going to come home. Some of them they're talking about shipping out and sending them out of state, and it's like we're not close rikers campaign to put facilities in the boroughs where they typically live. It needs to be a back. I know it is a bit out of state, and the last thing we want to do is create a situation where some of these women are shipped out and their children and their families have less access to them. So I want to know if that was something, there's something in the plan for that, because that's what's being spoken about by the director.
We talk to the Department of Corrections all the time, all across the country. We are so versed, yes, sweetheart, we are so versed in what they say. They will shape-shift themselves till the end of time to keep this system in place. We have more than a backup plan. This movement has many parts to it that, you know, we discuss, we don't discuss. We have another bucket of work called Reimagining Communities. We have work around the issue of women who people don't think will ever be able to come out of prison. And so we have all of these pieces. We've been at this for 10 years, thinking about this.
I was wondering what the alternative was, because this is what's being spoken.
Yeah, well, we can want, you know, we're not gonna put all our, you know, thoughts and strategies into the open air, and we don't work with everybody.
Right.
So, just so you're aware of that, we're abolitionists. We are very particular about who we do our work with. We are very strategic about that. We have had to deal with the ecosystem of the criminal legal system of formerly incarcerated people who are not politicized, don't know the historical and political context of this work, and have been willing to carry water for people that are causing significant harm in our communities. And so we are very careful about who we work with, and we are very strategic about that. So, you know, we are aware of that. We have been strategizing about that. And when it comes to women in incarceration, we are the experts. And we have a very, you know, well thought out plan that's moving forward to end incarceration of women and girls in this country. I appreciate you, brother, and welcome home.
And I want to say that Rhode Island, you know, we have like, your dean just shared 1 year, you know, for substance, things like, so Rhode Island is notorious for cycling women in and out. So clearly, are they a safety rate if they're doing 60, 90, 1 year, 2, separating families, putting children into care, things like sex work, where you got like Coyote fighting on that end, you got other organizations fighting about ending incarceration for the possession of substance. You've got all these things in Rhode Island. We've got $17 million going in, and I want to underscore what James is saying. It is being said by directors that if we do, well, we'll just ship them out, and it's almost like a you know, kind of a double double sword, like, well, if you want us to close, we'll ship them out, kind of like, we'll show you, right? So it's like having that, being aware that we need that plan in place, but also knowing that I can only speak to Rhode Island, that the numbers that churn in and out should never have been there in the first place. If they're arguing public safety and they're doing a year, 6 months, and separating families and creating this long-term trauma, if you really want to talk about public health and safety and saving the state money, we're talking about all those state systems that are draining when a woman goes to prison, when families are separated, when they're losing their children, and then another state entity that's budget's going up to take those kids, you see, and it is this ecosystem that just keeps feeding one another. And I did want to say, like, some of the things that was said about, you know, Rhode Island, we've heard some grim, our last pardon was a dead guy. But I also know too, there's some hope, because we've seen some change in our legislature, in our representation. And I'm just looking at David Morales, who's here, who is newly been elected, and I've seen him on the front lines marching, and I know there's, you know, others like that in the legislature that are starting to join this fight, that know this is wrong. It's just wrong, and that they need to end this, and they're a part of this, and really look into the people to join this. I wanted to also, all is not lost.
And I know I've done a lot of talking, I apologize, but this is very important, because this system is never going to be, it's not going to relent.
No.
So if we continue to just think this fight, this is one piece of the fight, clemency. This is not our fight. We're abolitionists, okay? We're abolitionists. We don't believe in this current system or that it's ever going to dismantle itself. Our work is through reimagining communities. It's not with coming and begging and asking a system that has made it very clear to us that they have no intention of ending the practice of incarcerating our people. So that's not where the meat of our fight is. So I just want to be clear about that. We're not about continuing to keep running and asking these folks. We're using the tools that exist. Clemency happens to be one of them. But our work is creating what different looks like. And our work is through a people's assembly process, through an abolitionist perspective. That's what's going to create the change from within our communities. That's the build. That's where all of our most of our capacity and our work and our resources is moving in. We have to be in this space, and damn it, there's a tool that governors have a right to use, and we're trying to encourage them to do that. But this is not our fight. This system is never going to change.
No.
Ever.
Right.
We've got to gut our people out of this system. That's the only thing that's going to create the change in ending incarceration.
And keep them out and invest in those, like you said, reimagining communities, and really invest, because we hear from everyone, man or woman, when they come home, you know, it's housing, it's education, it's employment, like these are where the resources need to start going, is back into the community, and how do we stop, you know, really keep putting it into that system. So I think that's huge.
That's kind of what I, like, going back to what James Montaro was saying, like, what is the plan B? Because, like, I talked to Trayara Hudgens at least 3 times out of the day, and like, I'm like, you know, I'm fighting for you out here, and I'm doing what I can do, and she's like, listen, they're never gonna shut the prison down. Like, she's got no hope, you know. So, like, I do have questions about, like, what is, like you had said, James, like, what is the backup plan? Like, she has said that they said that they're gonna ship her out. You know, they're waiting for her appeal to come back, and her plan is to be shipped out.
And the only control that we have over when our people are entangled and buried in the system is to try and use the power of the people to impress upon those people who run prisons and those people who have the power to make those kinds of decisions, to know that the people demand and want something different. There's no easy fix here in terms of what you're a slave to the system. Your body and what happens to you, you're not in control of. Nobody is in control of once you are entangled in this system. And so we don't have any, you know, magic wand that we can wave and say, you know, system relent. It's not gonna happen. And so we have to use the tools that are currently in place, but we know for sure Well, sure. First of all, mass incarceration, they call it that for a reason. Never mind people who just care. But just amongst ourselves, there's millions of us. If we stop relenting and thinking that, you know, celebrities are going to change the world for us, and actually get down on the ground and join this movement to reimagine our communities and to really fight and to shift public opinion so that the people who do keep these power brokers in place, who are mostly white men, challenge that power. Literally, challenge the power. We're not going to be able to get, you know, women like your friend out. We have been successful to get quite a few women and men out using the tools that the state already has. But the state is not here to just turn people over to us. That's not going to happen. But we can make it, we can move and shift the ground enough to create the opening, like the opening that opened for Danielle. Danielle was serving 3 life sentences. Now you talk about somebody who doesn't, you know, people would say she's never gonna come home. Well, we didn't think that. We were like, as long as we're living and breathing, we're gonna fight to bring Danielle home. And now we know your person. We're gonna fight to bring her home. Right now, that's what we can do. And that shifts the ground a little bit. That breaks a crack in the concrete, you know, that you know, can create something different. You know, there's no, you can't, don't believe anybody who sits in front of you or wants to change. Don't believe people who want to challenge everything. You know, get on the ground, goddammit, and do something. Right? I don't want to think about the impossible. Right. I want to think about what I can do right now today with both of my feet on the ground. What can I do today? Right? That's all we can do. And that's what we will do. That's what we're trying to do here. What can we do today?
Free her! Free her! Free her! And that's what we can do.
Oh, yeah, okay, Belle and Pat.
I love it. I'm glad this way this is thinking, because even if we had the power to bring all the women home, how do we stop them from locking more women up? We have to change laws. We've got to break that cycle. So we have a little slogan. There are no bad women, but there are a lot of bad laws.
Right.
We need to start thinking about that. Like you say, this is just the first leg of bringing them home, but there's going to be more going in. If they close the prisons, they're not just going to let them go. They're going to shuffle them somewhere else.
Reimagining Communities covers all of those pieces. It's an amazing model. It came from women who have been buried in prisons thinking about how to create change. It's not our model. It came from 3 years of listening around the country, dumping it all on the table, those women coming back and picking out the pieces, and it's the people's bond. It's the sisters. It's the model of the sisterhood.
And we were tired of reimagining prisons.
And we were tired of reimagining prisons. The Vera Institute and other large nonprofits that extract millions of dollars out of the ecosystem, out of the criminal legal reform ecosystem every year, that should be going to all of the organizations in this room doing this work on the ground. They extract millions of dollars. They slide a napkin across the table, and they have a budget that's, you know, 50 times any of our budgets, because they want something, you know, and they're a national nonprofit that can get it done. But, you know, they carried a narrative for years. The narrative was reimagining prisons. Well, we're tired of reimagining prisons. We're sick of that. Don't send another report out with people smiling while they're sitting in jail on a bunk. You know, the cover of one of their later reports. Who the hell, what prison were you in? You know, don't do that. We're not reimagining prisons anymore. Not in my neighborhood. You know, not in my family. And when you talk about continuing prisons, for those of us that have been there and are from communities that are most entangled in this system, that child right there is never going to see inside of a prison. That's my granddaughter. This is what I fight for every day.
Okay? So, you gotta think about who you're talking, you're not talking about everybody and their children, you're talking about our children.
And nothing is written in stone. Nothing is written in stone, but we have to give them alternatives for not going back into the prison system. We have to give our communities what they need. We have to give them what they need to live, what they need to survive. You know, we just don't wake up today and say, oh, I want to go to jail. So I'm gonna go to stand in front of the precinct, I want them to take me to jail. No. People are trying to survive in all different ways. Children are hungry, people have habits, you know, people have health issues. There's so many different things, so we have to attack all these issues and help our communities within our communities, you know, to help them to survive with jobs and survive and learn and teach them how to survive without doing things they have to do to go to prison.
And stop carrying the narrative of prison reform. Who the hell needs prison reform? You know? Women need to be free. You didn't have to tell Virginia ran the damn prison. Right? You didn't have to, she trained COs, the guys who came in there. She trained them how to do their jobs. We don't need prison reform. We don't need people coming in and saying, oh, we're gonna give you special credits now, like the First Step Act, which was the biggest carceral capitalism bill on the planet, but nobody read it. Nobody understood what the First Step Act really was about under the Trump administration. So we're not politicized. We get into this arena and we don't do our homework. And we cause more problems and slow to a grind progress. And so we have to really understand, we shouldn't be fighting for prison reform. You know, that's a waste of time. Our people in the prisons need to get out. And so, and give us our people back. We'll figure it out.
I'm gonna give it to Pat, I know I'm down here.
Just, I hope you don't mind me weighing in. I wanted to provide some additional backdrop to the story the attorney told about the amnesty or clemency that was granted to that man 100 years ago. The governor at the time was Lincoln Chafee, and Lincoln Chafee was and is highly principled in his opposition to the death penalty. So much so that an individual was accused of a capital crime here in Rhode Island and was to be released to the federal government. Lincoln Chafee refused to do so, citing a states' rights argument that ultimately ended up in the Supreme Court. Now, what does this have to do with today's situations? Ultimately, the state of Rhode Island lost that case in the Supreme Court, and it was vigorously argued that the criminal had to go back and potentially face the death penalty. The attorney arguing the case for the federal government was the Rhode Island federal attorney, who happens to be none other than one Peter Nerona, who is our current Attorney General. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about, on our little world where I come from, as we like to say, in the halls of justice, justice is usually found in the halls.
I like that. Wow. I like that.
Raquel.
Thank you for that.
Hi, this question is for, well, it's not really a question, but Geraldine, so you touched on something that means everything to me. So you said when you went to court, it was for a drug charge, and you had drug addiction problems, and you asked to be sent into treatment, and what they gave you instead was jail time. Do you think that helped you?
So I didn't go to jail for a drug charge. I went to jail for a B&E and forging checks, and it was behind me using drugs, because I would have never done that if I wasn't under the influence of crack cocaine.
Right.
Do I believe that it helped me going to jail? No, I don't think it helped me going to jail. I think the things that I did in jail helped me, like focusing on myself and getting my mindset correct. But I could have did that in a program as well. I didn't have to be behind bars to get my mind right.
$50,000 a year.
Right.
About one. No, you didn't.
Right. Exactly. And that's kind of like that's my problem, because that's where I was. You know, when I was arrested the last time, I was arrested for. You know, it was for drug possession, but nonetheless, it's all pretty much the same thing. When we have drug addiction, we are, and our reasons is because of a chemical balance that we have, and it's unfair and put us in jail. So I'm glad that you got the help that you did yourself in jail, but I just wanted to see if you think that was.
Honestly, the only thing that jail helped me was finding people like Trayara Hudgen and Danielle Lefebvre and Misty Ospina and Katie Bonnell and Tawana Sampson. These are women that have been in there for decades that, are fighting for them to come home, but some of them won't get to see that. And I'm hoping with this work, we can bring all our women home, all our mothers home. Nobody deserves, I honestly don't believe anybody deserves to go to jail. I think that we need to do something different. Like, going to jail, like I said, did not help me. It just, first of all, it scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Okay? And I could go to jail, back to jail with any bad decision that I make in any given moment. I have 5 years over my head.
Bad luck.
I try to do the right thing every day. Today actually makes 8 months clean for me. I heard about this movement. I actually heard about this throughout Trayara's Facebook, and Cherie had sent her a message. So I'm the background person of that Facebook. So she thought she was talking to Trayara, but she was talking to me. But I won't ever give up on any of our women that's in there. No matter what happens, I'm always gonna fight. And Trayara has a hard time believing that someone's out here fighting for her. Because she has lost hope. She's been there 5 years. And people have told her over and over again, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna help you. And I'm the only person that's actually came out here and stuck to my word.
See, everything happens for a reason. You know what I'm saying? So there was, behind everything, there was a bigger reason why you went to.
Correct. And I truly believe that.
And what's unfortunate and why it's so important for the women to get this clemency is because for whatever reason, though the women are the one that raise the children and have the bond with the children and everything else, like the men's facilities are so much better than the women's everywhere. They have so much more privileges. The women get dirt for treatment, for facilities, for everything.
Yeah, I have no time to talk about the harassment that continuously used to happen in the women's prison. I would be here all day long. I actually had to make a call to the Santagata. She's the warden assistant. Because of the harassment that Trayara was going through, they actually booked her for a false PREA against another individual. And I was able to get that dropped. And I just let her know that Trayara is not a forgotten inmate in there. So if you guys continue to mess with her, I'm coming after you guys.
God bless you.
She raised a good point about what are the other pieces of this. Some people work on campaigns as part of the national work that all they do is work on. Our campaign director is here, Christina Mensick. They work on what are the pieces of legislation. So we figured that out with the sisters around the country. If we passed this rack of legislation, that too would significantly reduce the incarceration population of women. Legalizing drugs is one of them. Right? Legalizing drugs, and DPA is working with us on this, Drug Policy Alliance. They're pushing their model. Christina is working on, we're all working on it somehow, some way. And getting to make sure that in the states that we're working currently, one of the first things we do is we come in and try and help to get this elder parole, medical parole, okay?
Yeah.
If you get elder parole, medical parole, now you're pushing you're pushing a lot of long-timers out, a lot of people who are elderly, a lot of people who are sick, those kinds of things. So there's all these different pieces. Some people don't want to work on legislation, but a whole lot of people do.
Right.
There's something for everybody to work on. And Mujahid Farid, who was one of our great dear mentors, he was one of the people who was responsible for the Attica uprising. He was buried in a New York State prison for years with Eddie Ellis and our other brothers who mentored us in this. Mujahid died because when you're in prison for decades, your body becomes sick. He died of cancer. And Mujahid said to me before he died, he was still living in New York, he's one of the founders of releasing aging people in prison. If you don't know about them, you need to look them up. RAC. Laura Whitehorn was one of the weathermen, was in federal prison. Kathy Boudin did her time in the New York State prison system. They're both home now. These are our mentors. And Kathy Boudin and Laura Whitehorn and Eddie Ellis started releasing aging people in prison. And they said to us, and Mujahid made me make a commitment. He said, let me tell you something with this national movement, what you need to do. You need to get a rack of these pieces of legislation. Ours is primary caretaker. We wrote that. We wrote the Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act, which was sabotaged and diluted to just a shameful place. But there's a rack that we have of policy and legislation that every state that's part of this movement working to end the incarceration of women and girls begins to move and work on these pieces of legislation. Because if we decrim sex work, if we decrim drugs, if we pass the primary caretaker bill, which we've passed in a red state, blue state, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and it's about to be signed into law in Missouri. If we pass elder parole and medical parole in all of these states simultaneously. If we get a moratorium, jail and prison moratorium bill in place. Those are just 5 pieces of things that if we're getting them simultaneously in all of the New England states being hammered on, one, it's going to bring in a whole lot of people who can't really get their head around any incarceration of women and girls, but if we get them passed, jail rights voting. Christina's big, that's her big thing, right? Making sure that everybody who's eligible to vote, who's locked up in a county jail or something, who still has a right to vote, votes and has access to vote. That bucket of policy and legislation, making sure that our sisters, we changed that in the federal system. We wrote that bill. The sisters inside the federal system wrote that bill, and we brought that information to Booker, who did shit with it, nothing. And Cut 50 just took it over and allowed a whole bunch of mess to happen with Republican legislators that diluted it. But on the federal level, we changed it administratively because Congress couldn't get the damn thing passed. To give women appropriate feminine hygiene products? Are you kidding me? It's like shackling. Like the states that still shackle women during labor and delivery. So if you just take those things and you get them passed, you're coming through the back door or the side door or whatever other door you want to talk about than just the door of let's shut it down. And all of those things, not only, they're gender neutral. It would significantly reduce the incarceration population of a whole lot of people. We have to be smart. If you're going to step into this ecosystem, Cassandra Frederick said it best, ED now of the Drug Policy Alliance. If you are on the freedom train and you decide to get off, don't derail it for the rest of us, okay? And this is what we're trying to say. It's okay to be formerly incarcerated. We worked hard over the past 10 years so that formerly incarcerated people could have a voice and a space as the experts. And we are the experts to tell our story. We're the experts. Nobody can tell my story about my incarceration. Nobody can tell this man 25 years about his incarceration. Nobody can tell Virginia Shea, none of us about our incarceration. That's our story and we're the experts. But if you choose, as a directly affected person, to get into the fight that we are in, you damn well better politicize yourself, educate yourself, and understand whose water you're carrying, because you are causing more harm than the movement that we're going towards.
Yes.
So we're encouraging everybody. Use your voice. If you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what you're doing, stay over here with your story.
Great.
Yes. And I want to start to wrap it up, and I know you mentioned a video. Andrea, I don't know how long it is, but
It's just quick, it's 2 minutes. I want people to really understand, we're here for
and we
clemency.
can close out with that
We
video.
know that we have pushed our sisters and our brothers. Virginia's nephew just came home 30 years. We have men and women that we are on the map fighting for who will never come out.
Council to the council.
We need your help to get these sisters in Rhode Island out of prison through clemency.
And a lot of this, you know, the work Andrea talks about is happening in Rhode Island.
Yes.
In pockets all over. There are so many things with decriminalizing drugs, working with DPA, the right to vote.
Be intentional about the work. Get together.
There it is.
Get together.
There it is.
Don't just do it, I'm gonna do this over here, I'm gonna do, no. Do it intentionally for the purpose of significantly reducing the incarceration
Stronger
population.
together, we need to stay together.
That's right. Be intentional.
So with that, I mean, we'll still be here, so if you had lingering questions, but I'm gonna play the video and
It's
with
quick,
that.
it's a little longer than 2 minutes. But
I
it's
just keep telling my story. It's different when you're telling the story from a perspective of not going through it and having been through it. I'm telling the story from a lived experience point of view. I know what it's like. I know what your kids go through. I know the trauma. My name is Danielle Miss. I am the Clemency Campaign Coordinator for the National Council, and I am also a student at Southern University of New Orleans. A lot of people don't know what life means inside the federal prison. Life means, like, to me, a life sentence is a death sentence because there is no relief. My situation was severe because I had like a triple life sentence plus 20 years. I was fortunate, and by the grace of God, I made it back to this side. It took a lot of hard work to make it possible for me to be here to share my story. My attorney named Sam Sheldon, I had another attorney named Jerry Mooney. Mr. Sam Sheldon, he got a lot of women out of prison with the clemency. Mr. Police wrote the letter for me to the U.S. Pardons Attorney. She must have sent it to the president, and he ended up giving me clemency. And that was the happiest day of my life. For him to just go out on a limb for me like that meant a lot to me. He was someone that looked at the justice system different than other people for him to do something like that. He took time and read my case. He reviewed my record of prison. He wanted to see who I really was or who I really could become.
My name is Danielle Metz, and I was the last sister that President Obama gave clemency to.
Has mentored other young women that have made mistakes and ended up in her same position. And I think that that's the beauty of the whole situation. Maybe God saw fit that I was strong enough as well that I didn't necessarily have to have my mom all those years, but there were other women that did. I'm Mikkel West, and I'm Michelle West's daughter. My mom was incarcerated when I was 10 years old for a drug conspiracy case, and she's serving 2 life sentences in 15 years. At 10 years old, when I came home and the feds had ransacked my grandmother's house and tore everything apart, that was when I learned what my purpose was in life. And that was to set an example for children with incarcerated parents. And my mom, she just deserves an opportunity, and we gotta forgive, and we have to move forward. And that's what this is about, forgiveness and strength. I want to see my mom come home, and I believe this is the opportunity. There's a lot of women who have lost hope and are giving up, and clemency is what would be hope. Clemency is hope. Clemency is a second opportunity. Clemency is a second chance that we're all deserving of at least once in our life.
It's a time for healing, and we can start here. You know, we can start with the clemency. And let's start with the first 100 women. It is important to grant these 100 women clemency because they're no different from me. They deserve a second chance.
I think that this 100 women is just the beginning of hundreds of thousands of women
we're asking President Biden to grant clemency to 100 women in his first 100 days. They served enough time. Let's change this. It's time for healing and, real humanity. Katrina Danforth, Brenda Fine, Renette Hauser, Charlene Castrion, Cheyenne Bradshaw, Roberta Bell, Eva Antencio, Terry Williams, Catherine Gardner, Pamela Tyler, Rosalie Garcia, Peggy Fulford, Minnie Coleman, Akuvia Afobi,
Marion Delaney, Kay Elson, Kimberly Jones, Linda Avila, Nikki Cash,
Gladys Oli, Marjorie Robinson, Karen McClaffin, Brandy Meeks, Kathleen Marks, Andy Morgan, Sandra Shoulders, Millicent Taylor, Judy Tall, Janita Vasquez, Lisa Randicoff, Tara Young Foster, Faith Brooks, Mikhail Makafovica,
Lisa Rente, Sharon Sexton, Tricia Teeter, Anastasia Bogomolova, Evelyn Bozon-Papa, Eucharis Caballos, Robin Cheney, Valerie Collins, Kay Gao, Micheline Hamuda, Alma Hernandez Prensado, Maria Inda, Juanita Lawson, Donna Munda, Stacy Weischatel, Jessica Fritz, Jessica Antunes, Michelle Duval, PJ Rodriguez.
Betty Schweiger, Pamela Tablet, Lisa Tony, Joyce Callen, Alicia Escobar, Viola Carolyn Trent, Elaine Young, Rosie Baker, Teresa Shine, Tina Courtley, Sandra Cook, Veronica Dale, LaTanya Davis, Deborah Drumley, Mercedes Salazar, Valenzuela, Mary Morgan, Yolanda Morton, Liz Ordaz, Corthea Peak, Lena Roberts, Kimberly Robinson, Vicky Sanders, Robin Bertelli, Eva Buck, Rita Cromwell, Doris Foster, Gail Nanmara, Precious Rogers, Ade Tutu Etty, Martha Evanoff, Josephine Gray, Amy Gonzalez, Maria Juvara, Sandra Carr, Holly Hopper, Nina Ivo, Kenny Yannicek, Cheryl Jealous of Him, Janice Kaden, Donna Langen, Kathleen Matthew, Valerie Rowe, Tammy Miller, Stella Nickel, Rebecca Parrott, Larissa Sakonsky, Angela Shavlowski, Monique Brady, Amelie Ellis, Conchetta Jackson, Christina Corbet, Marie Mason.
Free my mom, Michelle Wicks.
To all of that. Let's get this done. We can do this. This is a start. Let's get it going.
Yeah, feel free if there's more.